Welcome to the Orthodontic Pearls podcast, where we share tips and tricks to better your clinic, business, and life. And now your hosts of the podcast, Doctors Chris Teeters, Brian Anderson, and Andy Sarpadar.
Welcome back to another episode of the Orthodontic Pearls podcast. I'm Andy Sarpadar, and here as always are my co-hosts, Dr. Brian Anderson and Chris Teeters. And today's episode is a little different because we're recording live from the launch event at the Oliv Aligner System. For those of you who are not familiar with Oliv, this is a new orthodontist-driven aligner platform that combines a high-quality aligner system with integrated digital monitoring and remote response technology. The idea is to create a more streamlined, specialist-led system that supports efficiency, great patient experiences, and predictable clinical outcomes. So it's been really interesting to hear the philosophy behind it and meet some of the doctors who have helped shape this platform. But before we get into today's conversation, Brian, Chris, how's everything going for you guys? How's Nashville treating you?
It's good to be here in person, actually. We're doing a podcast in person, which I think is really fun. And I've never been to Nashville before. And I was just marveling last night. I was walking those streets with my wife, Diana, and I just thought, only in America can you have like a city built around entertainment. Yeah. Right? And that's what makes America great. Of course, there are other things, but yeah, it's great.
Absolutely, I'd say the same. First time coming here and doing line dancing, I enjoyed it more than I thought. I was on the dance floor all night going, I gotta bring my family back here and really dive into this. And my daughter's a dancer, and yours too, and I'm sure they would just love this kind of thing. So just great to be in the heart of it, especially with the lunch and hanging out with some of my best friends.
Well, I didn't get to do much of the line dancing. I'm not that brave, but I did have
You were out there all night. He was out there longer than Chris, man.
Whatever. I did have a great conversation with Esther Feldman, though, and Esther is one of the founding members of the Oliv community on the Alpha Group, and this gives her a unique perspective on the platform, and we're going to come talk together about some of what we're trying to accomplish. But before that, we're just really excited to have you here, Esther. How are you doing this weekend?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me. It's also my first time in Nashville. It's been great walking down Broadway, seeing all that live music and people. It kind of felt like a mini Vegas in a way, but so lively, so fun. Made me feel much younger than I am.
It made me feel older. I was like, I gotta go to bed.
That was fun. We were going, so Chris and I get in late, and we're walking over to the party, and then we bump into Brian at like 8:30 or something?
No, it was like 9:45. Give me some credit.
It was 8:30 your time, though, because you're from the West Coast. Anyway.
Well, 7:30 my time.
Old man getting back to bed.
And there's nothing better at this age to go to bed at 9 and wake up at 5, things we never thought we would appreciate when we were younger. But,
absolutely.
It's a good thing.
One of the themes that we were talking about yesterday was this idea of resilience. I know that's one of your core values, I would suppose. So, I'd like to get in a little bit about your background. Tell us what you've been through over the past decade, getting this practice off the ground, going from Canada, United States, all of this, and how resilience has really played a big factor in that.
Sure. So I'm from Montreal, Canada. I'm trilingual. I speak English, French, and Hebrew. I did all of my schooling in Canada. So I did both my bachelor's in science and my dental degree, which is a DMD at McGill University in Montreal. Okay. And McGill does not have an orthodontic program. So if I wanted to stay in Montreal, I would have had to do it in French at University of Montreal. Oh, okay. So I decided to apply elsewhere. And I got in at University of British Columbia in Vancouver. I was the second graduating class from that program. So it was a pretty new program when I was there. And I graduated with a diploma in orthodontics and a master's in craniofacial science.
Wow, quite impressive. With the topic of resilience, how do you define resilience?
So resilience for me is the ability to bounce back. Things are going to be uncomfortable. You're going to encounter obstacles. Life is good. Life is hard. Life is going to throw things your way, and it's how you get through that, learn from that, and adapt. So for me, resilience is a lot about adapting.
And you mentioned to me that resilience is a learned trait. It's not something that you're necessarily born with or without. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to some of our listeners who are trying to develop resilience?
Oh, that's a really good question. I do believe part of it is innate. And it's the way, some people just fold in on themselves when encountering something difficult or uncomfortable, and others kind of face it head on. So I think it's a lot of strength of character, training yourself that you will get through something. Going back to your original question of how I ended up getting from Vancouver to Los Angeles, I have an ex-fiance who was in New York City when I was in Vancouver. We were doing the long distance thing. I was taking red eyes. It was exhausting. I remember sitting in the wire bending lab at night and him being like, why aren't you calling me to say goodnight? Because of the 3-hour time difference. Yeah. So over 3 months into my residency, I said to him, I can't continue to do this. This is too stressful. Yeah. And he said, well, what if I moved to Vancouver? And Vancouver's a beautiful city, but it wasn't where I wanted to lay down my roots. Yeah, sure. And we had both been to LA a few times together and loved it. And he said, well, what if I moved to LA? It'll be the same time zone, an easier flight, a way easier flight. It's 3 hours. And I said, yeah, I would totally try that if you moved to LA. So I knew that I was going to move here when I finished my residency. Okay. And then I was able to get a TN visa, which is one of those North American free trade visas. So that was easy. I just needed a job offer. I have my Canadian passport, go through customs and I had to bring my official diplomas, lots of paperwork.
Oh, sure.
That was just a stamp in my passport. And I started associating at different practices. Okay. And I did that for about a year. And I realized I need to have my own practice. This is a logistical nightmare. I'm all over the place. This is just too much. So I had to go to my immigration attorney. I had to figure out how to get a special visa so that I can open up a practice, which was very stressful. I had to get a loan from the bank being a Canadian citizen, which was also very stressful, hence the resilience theme. And I called off my wedding about 3 months before, exactly to the date.
That's crazy. I mean, so he moved to LA for you.
Technically, yes.
Technically, yes.
I say we moved for each other.
Yeah.
It was,
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. But you both centered on LA. Correct. And the main driver is that was the relationship. Is that correct? Or
yes. And creating new opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in residency, I remember my professors looking at me like I was crazy. They're like, you're going to move to LA? Orthodontists are a dime a dozen in LA. And
that is true.
And there's an orthodontist on every corner. And I remember thinking to myself, there are 36 million people in Canada and there are 38 million people in California. And, I think if you have integrity, if you navigate your life with kindness, with integrity, with resilience, with treating people the way you want to be treated, then there's always going to be a place for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's how I live my life. And that's when I decided to start my own practice and go through lots of stress and lots of pressure as a newly single Canadian in Los Angeles, not being a USC grad, a UCLA grad, which I didn't realize how much weight that carries.
Yeah.
People take that stuff very seriously.
USC, I don't know how much that carries, to be honest with you. Not much for me, I'll say that. I'm going to take some heat, I'm sure, but only USC guys. Who cares what they have to say? On this topic of resilience, I understand that you inherited a lot of this from the example your grandparents set forth, and we got into a little bit of this discussion last night as well. We did. And you mentioned how this has been sort of a defining character, part of your character. Can you tell us a little bit about your grandparents and what sort of values their experience has instilled in you?
Absolutely. This is something obviously very close to my heart. So my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. My mom's parents, both of them were in the camps. Both of them lost multiple family members. They lost their parents, they lost siblings, they lost nieces and nephews. My grandmother was 13 years old when she was separated from her family. 13 years old. So they both ended up in Canada. They met working for another immigrant at a jewelry store. And it's part of the fabric of my life, being the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. It's my legacy. I think it's important to share the testimony that my grandparents went through, which they were very vocal about. I even got to go back to Poland with them and visit their hometowns, the camps that they were held at. My grandfather remembers the exact barrack that he slept in. Very emotional. We lit remembrance candles for family members there. We said special prayers for them. So, and I was with my dad and with my brother on that trip. It just the way the years worked out, which was very special. But my grandfather always taught me something very important, which was the need to create your own destiny. If you want something bad enough, and it's something that's going to be hard to get to, don't give up.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't speak the language when he moved to Montreal. He built a business out of nothing. These were real immigrants that have really strong stories that show you much more resilience than I had. But I think it is a part of who I am. It's in my DNA. And any time that I would hit something, a roadblock, something that was hard, you know, waking up at 2 a.m. in a cold sweat thinking, oh my gosh, I'm building out a space in Brentwood, Los Angeles. There's an orthodontist in my building across the street, in the building next door. Why am I putting all my eggs in one basket? Why am I doing this? I would think of what they went through, and I was like, I got this. This is nothing relative to what they went through.
You know, one thing that I think is so interesting is you're describing something that's frame of view. How do you view life? Do you view life through primarily fear? Because we all have reasons to be afraid. Your grandparents, the most of almost anybody, right? And you encounter difficulties in life, and we all have things that we experience that we can imagine experiencing that strike at our heart in that's touch that fear, part of us. And I think when you can square that, when you can look fear in the face and say, you know what, but I can also choose courage. I can choose confidence. I can choose faith. There's such a huge difference in how someone's life goes. I mean, that's just, and you know what? It's forged through hardship. It's always forged through hardship. There's no other way, because it has to be experiential learning. And of course, on that note, I think it's interesting that you say it's part of your fabric, because I think there is a generational thing. And so I think it's important to talk about these things, because I think sometimes, unless we're aware, well, generation, what got passed down to me, like fear-based mentality, like avoid risk, like don't believe in yourself, like there's too much competition, there's too much this. And there's a place for that, right? We don't want to be stupid. But to your point, I think it's important to also say, well, the other side is also worth trying on. The side that's not fear-based, but confidence-based, faith-based, right? And if you lead from that position, things will turn out okay. Even if your business failed, you still would be okay, because you are who you are. And speaking of real resilience, because hard things can be overcome. Failures can be overcome. Challenges can be overcome. And you don't have to embrace that fear and cling to that fear, and then you live with that the rest of your life. You can say, that's always a part of me. I can look at it, but go a different path. I just think that's remarkable, and that's one of the things I find most remarkable about survivors of the Holocaust is just they had to look at some really, really dark stuff. And what Viktor Frankl, what do you choose to do with that?
And to rebuild.
How do you choose it? Yes, and rebuild. So after a deconstruction, let's put something back into reconstruction. I just think it's a beautiful thing, and that's why the world goes round, because people decide after a heartbreak, a breakup, something ending that we can rise from this and we can begin again. So, I just think that's a beautiful story of your grandparents.
And I was telling Andy last night, my grandfather left me a voicemail the day after I called off my engagement, and he said, and I saved it, and I still have it. And I listen to it whenever I need to. But he said, this is who you are. You knew that this wasn't right for you, and we are 100% behind you, and we support you. And he was a deeply spiritual man too. And he said, don't even think for a minute that you're gonna be alone. You have so many people that are rooting for you. And I met my husband, Evan, a year later, and he's the love of my life, and everything was meant to be. So, I often think of my grandfather, who's no longer with us. He did manage to come out and see my practice. He was 94, and he flew to LA, and with my grandmother, and they came to see it, which was, he was crying. He was so proud for him to think of, look at what my granddaughter has been
That's
able to
great.
accomplish, and to meet his great-grandchildren, and to see that his line is going to
That's the
continue.
legacy.
That is the
That's
legacy.
the legacy, like what he went through, and he personally had to become transformed.
Yeah.
And then he can then help other people actualize and transform it.
Exactly.
So I just think that's just such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm glad that he got to see your practice. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was huge.
Well, speaking of your practice, I know you have a very, very well-run, systematized boutique practice. So this is, you're catering to a higher socioeconomic demographic. I went to school out at UCLA, so I'm familiar with the area. Definitely a little bougie, as we would call it. Tell us a little bit about this practice and some of the systems that you use to accomplish what you're doing. I know you're a very structured person. You got a method for everything. So, tell me a little bit about how this practice runs, and maybe some tips for our viewers who could benefit from that.
Sure. So it's a small practice. I have 3 chairs, 3 staff, plus 1 UCLA pre-med intern.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
We see patients 4 half days a week.
4 half days a week. So what are your hours?
So depends. So Rosie, who's my front office administrator, she will, based on patient demand and how she schedules, it can be a 9 to 12 day, or it could be a 1 to 5 day.
And this is based on what patients want?
Well, they don't know which days are like,
so
they don't know that I'm working half days. Correct.
You have alternating, like Monday is going to be 1 to 5.
I check on Sundays, so I know what's going on that week. And Fridays, my Fridays are really sacred to me. So Fridays, I do not work, and Thursdays, I never work in the morning, because that's the volunteer hours for my daughter in preschool and my daughter in kindergarten are usually Thursday morning. So I get to go in and bake challah with them and do all the things and be present at the school, which also helps build my practice. So
it's really inspiring to hear that you can be a present mother, you can do all these things, and even in the midst of all this competition, you don't have to be open these crazy late hours. You're able to accomplish a schedule like that. I'd love to know how you did that in the midst of such a busy place.
Yeah, so I always think of it like I'm juggling 4 glass balls. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm an orthodontist, so my responsibility to my patients, and then I'm an employer. I have a lot of people that are depending on me. So my schedule was not always like this. It used to be what I called the Swiss cheese schedule when I opened from scratch, right? I'd have a patient at 9 a.m., I'd have a patient at 11:15, right? That's how you build.
Right.
And I was not treating every single patient that came through my door, even as a new practice.
See, that's bold, because I've been there myself, and I remember feeling like you got to convert every single one of those if you're going to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
So, again, maybe you've got a different mindset about that, but like how do you...
So I like to think that I have antennas for patients that won't be the right fit for me, or that I'm going to disappoint. And I've been burned, and I've learned the hard way that those are never worth it.
Yeah.
So
We've all
now,
learned that,
right, being able to suss that out in a consultation and say to a patient, we get engaged for 2 years. Or 18 months, right? I don't want to disappoint
Probably
you.
longer for Brian's treatment plans.
I want you to like me.
Brian's like 36 months.
No, but I tell them, I want you to like me. I want you to look forward to coming to see me. And I want to look forward to you coming in and me seeing you.
Yeah.
And if I don't think it's the right fit, then I'm going to save you the trouble. And I think you should go see one of my colleagues.
Yeah.
And I have a couple names that I give them.
Is Dovey Prero one of those names?
No, Dovey's a close friend. But, and I'm not a big phase 1 provider. I don't believe that every child in the mixed dentition needs treatment. Yeah. And maybe that's part of the Canadian training, because I do feel like there's kind of a dichotomy in that world of how to treat. One of my colleagues in LA said to me, like, you don't put the engagement rings on the 6s on every kid that walks through the door. I'm like, I do not do that. I do not do that.
Man.
So
he calls it engagement rings.
He calls it engagement rings.
And that's such an ick for that.
Yeah, and especially becoming a mom and having 2 little girls, like I want to treat everyone the way I would treat my children. So I'm very honest with my patients, and they come on a recall schedule, and that has gained so much trust in the community. And my community, it's a very well-educated community. Part of why I love where I am is because I truly feel enriched during the day by all my patients that come in, whether it's someone in the entertainment industry or a med tech inventor or someone who is in a startup. I just find like I'm surrounded by all of these big thinkers and different types of thinkers, very different from like the insulated community I lived in Montreal. I feel like I'm in the big leagues now because I'm meeting these interesting people. So back to my schedule, I'm getting on a tangent. So after I had both my kids during COVID. So my first daughter was July 2020, which was the peak before the vaccines came out. And my second daughter was December of 2021. So they're 17 months apart.
In LA.
In LA. So after I had my second daughter and things were getting a little more back to normal with how we would schedule our patients, I decided I don't want to go back full time. I want to nurse my daughter. I want to be there for her milestones. I want to be able to experience these things. This is what fills my cup. So I leaned hard into dental monitoring. Yeah.
Tell us how that works. So is that what allows you to keep this part-time schedule?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely does. And again, Los Angeles, as you know, the traffic and, most of the private schools, I would say within walking distance from my office, are probably upwards of $50,000 a year. So these are parents who don't want to pull their kids out of school to come to my office. These are parents who work or again, have to fight LA traffic to park, to find parking, to come up to my office for an aligner check.
Right.
Or something that might not necessitate an actual visit at my office. So I feel like I got very lucky. And again, part of creating my own destiny. I had been a KOL for Propel when Propel was its own company. And my rep from Propel ended up working for dental monitoring. And he had said to me, this is going to be so great for you. Because I knew a little bit about it through the ortho world, but I hadn't really seen it or gotten a demo or anything like that. And I just decided on a whim, I'm like, I will invest and see if this works for me. And of course, definitely it's, baby steps and part of the resilience, adopting a new technology.
It's not easy.
And it's not easy and you get frustrated and there are definitely kinks that have to be worked out and systems that have to be put in place so that it makes sense for you. But once we got the ball rolling, I was like, I am never working a full day again.
That's incredible. So tell me how that works exactly. Like, so you're actually, is it mostly aligner patients you're using this on? Is it braces patients too?
So good question. So I don't do it on if a patient has an expander, I'm not doing phase ones with dental monitoring.
Oh, no.
Those are patients that I'm seeing in the office. All of my aligner patients have dental monitoring. And a select few of my braces cases, depending on the patient situation. So if they live far from my office, if they're the child of someone who is shooting a movie in the UK or in South Africa or in Australia, they need it. I have a couple of surgical patients as well that live in other states.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Those patients have dental monitoring. And it's a really nice tool for me to communicate with colleagues of mine in those places. If a bracket comes off, if a coil comes off, if there's something I need to tell them, I can tell them in advance so that it's a seamless appointment, that they're doing a favor for me.
Yeah, I've heard that. Jeff Sudet talks about that a little bit, being able to be aware of what's going on before they come in so that you can prepare for it. Now, of course, that requires certain systems too. If you're a little bit more reactionary, then it could get in the way. But I think like one of the themes that I've noticed with any kind of new technology is that you sort of have to adapt into it. Maybe that sounds very intuitive to say, but you can't just plug a digital product into a system that's set up for analog technology and expect efficiency.
Square peg, round hole.
Exactly. So you do have to modify a little bit.
Either from the very beginning, like you go in, or you can segue in, which is one of the things I love about Oliv. So I had never used dental monitoring before. Of course, I have friends who use a lot of it. Some of our relapse, band members use a lot of dental monitoring. And Jeff Sudit does, of course. We've spoken with Jeff, and Jeff's a good friend. And for me, I thought, okay, this is great because I get an experience with dental monitoring with Oliv, and I can start getting my feet wet because I already have a busy practice that sees a high, we're very busy and booked out, and it's like for me to make a change, speaking of changing systems, it'd be really difficult for me to make a massive change at once. Just like any big company, which is another great thing about Oliv is it's a younger company now that it can be nimble, right? But any big thing, big institution, big practice, whatever, hard to make big changes without major disruption. So for me, it's like, okay, well, how could I start maybe incorporating this where it's not so disruptive that it actually, because I'm already stressed out at work. I already can't make a phone call to my kid's doctor when I'm at work. So what can I do though that won't push things overboard, but I can start adopting incrementally? And that's, I think, one nice thing that people want to get their feet wet.
It allows
with
them
dental
to
monitoring.
dabble.
It allows them, there's no extra cost with it. So that's one of the things I think is really nice about what we've managed to build into Oliv.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's a nice segue into the reason why we're all here this weekend, which is this Oliv launch party. So, you talked about dental monitoring. That was already a part of your practice. And then at what point does Oliv come along? So you said, let me just get this timeline straight. So you had Propel, your rep introduced you to dental monitoring through
That was 2020, end of 2021.
2021. At what point did you meet Kate?
So I had met Kate at AAO, that was in LA, in 2018 or 19. I don't remember exactly what year it was. It was before COVID. And I remember she asked me to be a part of, there was a Propel Women's event. So that's where I first met Kate.
And she was with Propel. Right?
She was with Propel at the time.
Kate at the time was a Propel rep.
Correct.
Okay.
But not in LA.
Okay.
Yes. So Kate reached out to me on social media and she said, hey, do you have a few minutes? I'd really love to pick your brain about something, see if you're interested, no pressure. We got on a call. One thing led to another. The next thing I know, I'm on a call with Nick, the CEO of Oliv. Then I'm on a call with Jeff Sudit, who's
we all know Jeff.
We all know Jeff, the famous Jeff. Yeah. And I did my first alpha call with Clark Colville, who is our clinical lead, who really, I was so engaged by him, listening to him. Yeah. He's so methodical and so intelligent.
And great professional integrity. He has great integrity too, what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
What does the data show, what does it not show?
Exactly. And this is how Oliv aligned with my practice. It was intentional. It was there were hard data facts that he brought out at that first meeting that we had in February of 2024 in Miami. That was an alpha meeting at a WeWork. We were 13 orthodontists.
Crammed into space.
Crammed into this little, around a conference table. It was the best meeting I've ever been to.
I remember the temperature being really stuffy or really hot or something, but it was still the chemistry was good.
It was so good. It was the first time we had all met in person.
Even though it was unpleasant and with the temperature, it was this is fun though.
Yeah. And I'm the daughter of an accountant, so a numbers guy, and my mom's a PhD in epidemiology, so a biostatistics person. So seeing facts, I was raised to have a critical mind. Yeah. Watching Clark present why Oliv makes sense and what Oliv is capable of, coming up with the name Oliv, writing it on a whiteboard at that meeting. Being a part of all of these parts that make up this product has been such an incredible experience for me, and so collaborative and so enriching. And I've learned so much. It's like a mini residency in a way. And so I really feel like with my practice, which is intentional, is I get to engage with my patients. So even though I'm working half days and maybe seeing 25 patients from 1 to 5 on a Monday, I have time with those patients. I have time in those consults. I'm building relationships, which is what I love to do. I'm connecting with moms. I'm connecting with teenagers. I'm connecting with dads. I'm connecting with nannies, whoever is bringing these kids in. And something that Philippe, the CEO of Dental Monitoring, said yesterday really resonated. He said, each person that comes into your practice, you do a mini software download each time, because you want to connect with them. You want to engage with them. You don't want them to feel rushed. You want to be able to remember a little tidbit that they had said the visit before, or, what the general dentist had called you to tell you about this patient. And you gotta like really get in there to figure out what that was. I don't feel so inundated by those things, because a lot of my patients are being monitored, and I'm only being notified by my staff when there's something that I actually need to see.
Yeah.
So
You're making space for that.
Correct. And it allows me to be so active in my kids' lives, right? I do zero marketing. I have grown my practice so organically. I spent $0 on marketing. I'll give money if, one of my patients is on a basketball team or whatever, but there's no SEO, there's none of that. I charge for consultation. I think I'm the only orthodontist in my neighborhood that charges for consultation.
This is a hot button topic.
I believe in valuing my time for somebody else to value my time. And
bold move in today's market, though.
Yeah, and I'm out of network. I don't take any plans. And I have built my practice from the ground up with the right people. So, for example, last week, I had a mom from one of these fancy private schools in West LA come in, and she said, I want you to know that I texted the class. She has twins, and she said, who can recommend an orthodontist? So everyone's throwing someone's name in the hat. And she said, one mom said, we love our orthodontist. She said one person said that, and that's why I'm here. And I think that just goes to show building these relationships, making people feel important, remembering things about them, because I'm not so inundated with noise, has really helped. And my staff are happy, and there's no drama. I love going to work. But I also love that I have room in my life for all the other things that matter, right? Which is also self-care, right? Like 100%. I want to be able to do everything and not feel like I'm so depleted at the end of the day when I get home to my family.
This is something that Chris and I talk a lot about, is that idea of you can't do all of the things. Even if you can do everything better than the next best person for it, you have to be able to learn to delegate a little bit. What is that you always say about, like, 80% done or something?
Yeah, 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome.
Even 60% maybe, but not that I'm saying that like that you're taking 60%, but there is something to cutting the things out of your life that don't bring you joy in order to create room for those things that do, or the things that only you can do. And I mean, that's, as orthodontists, we understand that's how we scale up. We're not doing all of our archwire adjustments, so that we can focus on the diagnostics. But it sounds like it takes it to a completely different level there.
We talked about that last weekend in Maui, and one of the big things is really just take time to audit. This is a huge pearl for everyone. Take time to audit your day, audit your week, audit your month, audit your life, and anything that you don't enjoy doing, anything that can be done by somebody else, empower other people to do that. So that way, everything that you do are the things that fill your cup. Like you said, you love creating relationships with people. That is your focus, not necessarily changing aligners or putting in the wire. Like, someone else can do that, and probably better than you, because they do that all the time. Same thing with your health. If you take care of your health and fitness and you're a great mom, you come to the office a recharged, happy person. You love coming to work. The staff feels that, your patients feel that. You don't have to do everything. We all talk about when we first started how we jump into changing an arch wire to help out, to think you're gonna be, this great new doctor. And then all of a sudden, I'd get this thing like, hey doc, we're running behind. Can you jump in the chair and do this adjustment? And it's like, oh gosh, that stuff will destroy you, right? So we've learned to empower our team to do those things. Hiring nannies to help, hiring people to, even just Instacarting your groceries, things like that. Like, you're saving 2 hours here. If the value of your time is so much more, and you can give so much more to your patients and your community. So I love that. It seems like you're a model of doing exactly that, and take it to the next level, because you've been able to get to a schedule all of us would dream about. So it's
and I don't want to gloat, but sometimes I find it hard when I'm amongst friends and other moms who are lawyers or CFOs or accountants or whatever they're doing, and they're so busy and they can't get the time off to go to the kids' class and volunteer at the the carnival or whatever is happening at the school. And I have the ultimate flexibility in my job. And then I think back and I try to, ground myself, and I say, well, think of where I started, running around to 6 practices, working,
It didn't just happen by accident.
No, and you know LA. I would
Didn't win a
work in
game show
one
to get this
place.
job.
I would work in East LA from 8 to 2 and then run to my practice for 2 new patient consults from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Right? And that money that I was making from working at that office was paying my rent and paying my staff. And another thing that you were saying, like the relationships, I think, and empowering the staff, I get to check in with my staff because they're not so overloaded during the day. And I think that's also created a lot of happiness and lightness. So I don't walk into the office stressed out. And of course, I have cases that don't always go exactly my way, but I'm also, I know enough to admit when I've made a mistake. I don't get defensive. And I'm not above telling a patient, you know what, I missed this. And I apologize, but here's what we're gonna do to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that also instills confidence and makes people happy that you're treating them like an equal and telling them that you made a mistake and owning up to things. So that's how I practice, that's how I live my life and navigate through the world. And that's my marketing. My marketing is sitting at dance class and talking to moms like this, right? Or going to the school and, Fridays are my sacred day where I actually do carpool for my kids. And that's when I get to, speak to the teachers.
See, one of the things I've always been impressed with you about is you have a strong sense of you know yourself and you know your values and you put trust in those things. And I think that's a good example. I think that's a good model for everybody, right? We all should be striving to know ourselves really well, to really go and to go deep enough that we can have confidence in making the decision to do a startup, to not do marketing. Why? Because you know what you want, you know what you value, and so you align your life with those things, and you do what you need to do to get there, but you align your life with those things, and then, because it's like, if one of these other, moms you mentioned, maybe right now their life is out of alignment. Like maybe they feel stressed because they want to go and participate. They can't because they can't get the time off, right? And I know that, and so I think it's a good reminder and a great example to just know, like, okay, well, what do I actually want in my life? And can I be smart enough and courageous enough to make the changes to allow that, or am I going to keep going down this path and then find that I'm out of alignment because where I am is so far from where I want to be that I feel this internal angst and anxiety and resentment and all these things that you see with people that aren't happy. They're resentful of the way their life is. Why? Because they didn't know that they didn't make the change, right?
Yeah. And so I've been there.
I think what you're describing, right? No, but that's the thing. And it's always that way. That's the beautiful thing. It's always through the discomfort and the failure to realize, now I know myself, because right? So I just think that's a good, but people don't have to be you, they don't have to be me, they don't have to be you. Just, know themselves. Like, just know yourself. And then maybe for them, they will market. And that will be the right thing for them. Not to say that, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we have these discussions and people that are listening might be thinking, oh, I need to be like this. Well, no. Be you. Yeah. Be the best you and know who that is. Know who that is, and then try to align your life with it. Owning your deficiencies, owning the things you're good at, and just aligning yourself. So I think the fact that you knew that, like, okay, well, dental monitoring aligns with this because I want to be a mom, because I've talked to you about that. And I had remembered 2 days a week, but I've forgotten it's 4 half days. So,
4 half days. Sometimes 3 half days.
But you mentioned the last time we talked in Jackson Hole at the Oliv Summit there in the fall. You'd said, because I want to be involved in my kids' day-to-day life, right? So you have this great balance. And I mean, to me, I think the thing that's most impressive that we should all strive for is you've recognized the things that make you happy, as Chris mentioned, and you've aligned your life around that. And of course, in this case, that includes dental monitoring, Oliv, and more time with
and remote
patients.
Response, right?
And maybe that's not, everyone just has to figure what they need, right?
Let's talk about Candid and how this integrates all of this into one product. I want to hear from both Brian and Esther, because you guys have been involved intimately in the development of this product. But it's had an interesting life cycle. You mentioned how you were all together in that first little stuffy room, coming up with a name and, just hearing about the potential here. But tell me, like, what is Oliv? How is that different from like Invisalign or Spark aligners or Angel aligners? What is the value proposition here, and how does the system work?
For me, the biggest value in Oliv is that it's all of these really, really amazing minds that have contributed little bits to it that have been incorporated into it. So there's a lot of intentionality, a lot of thoughtfulness into the product, into the branding, into the software and the UI. So all of that is important, but for me, it's the overall package.
Tell me about that. What's in the package?
So I was referencing it more from an efficiency standpoint. Okay. So not only are you getting aligners, you're getting dental monitoring and you're getting remote response. So all in one glorious, beautiful tower with a beautiful magnet closure. It's really...
it all just looks and feels nice.
Yeah.
It all looks and feels like high class.
Yeah, and
it performs well.
Yeah, and I have very high-end patients. And for me, I was doing Invisalign with a lot of palatal attachments, which is much more, strenuous and tedious on the operator and on my staff.
Because they're less visual.
Less visual, but they're more technique sensitive. And, patients are like, why do I feel like I'm chewing on nails? I'm like, because you are.
Yeah, pretty much.
But you chose the aesthetics over the function. So, we had a lot of issues with that. I find with Oliv, I really trust the aligner. I trust the system. Having a longer trim line, being a more holistic displacement type of biomechanics that are used for this aligner system, that my teeth are going to track, that I have a close eye on it, that, and the proof is in the pudding. We have the data, and I've done enough cases now to see that. So I have a patient in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, who's an Oliv.
How are they doing right now?
You know what? I'm sure she's fine, but she's tracked beautifully, and she had lost confidence. She only comes to LA for the summers, but, her prosthodontist sent her to me, and he said she did Invisalign or a different aligner system in Riyadh, did not have a good experience, did not like the attachments, and really she just needed a little bit of arch development, a little bit of, finagling the incisors. Sure. And I was like, great. I'm going to scan you. I don't even need a freehand attachments. I'm just going to ship this thing to Riyadh. Yeah. And it has been perfect. I have a working supermodel who's in Oliv right now.
Really?
And she's no attachments. Yeah, it's for lower incisor crowding. Sure. She's thrilled. She also said, her general dentist called me knowing I do Oliv, and he's like, listen, I looked at the Invisalign Express, attachments everywhere. She's gonna freak out. I'm sending her to you. Yeah. And it was like a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I'm not selling these people. They're asking for it now. People are catching wind and they're getting excited, and there's faith in the system. And when they trust you, because again, I preach integrity and I only do what feels good for me. Sure. And I would only treat people the way I want to be treated. So my own sister is an Oliv right now in Montreal, really? Canada. Yep. They shipped directly to Canada. It showed up on her doorstep. For her, I free-handed some attachments. But but the point is that I trust the system, and the system has proven its worth to me. And again, integrated with dental monitoring, integrated with remote response. So on weekends, because my office is still more concierge boutique based, sometimes I catch myself responding on dental monitoring if it's not a scheduling question. Yeah. Because I want my patients to feel like they're connected to me. None of these are really emergencies.
It's a choice. You don't have to set it up.
No, as a choice. But the remote response aspect of Oliv is lovely.
That could basically just cover all of that for you.
It could. Right?
Yeah, but you don't use it for that?
I don't. Right now, remote response is only my Oliv cases. I'm dabbling in remote response right now.
Okay. All right. What about you, Brian? How's your experience been? So
it's been good.
Just to kind of sum this up, so it's centered around this aligner product. Yeah. Okay. And dental monitoring is packaged with that, as well as the remote response. And remote response, that was Glenn Krieger's thing, right? So that's the one where you basically outsourced monitoring the dental monitoring, right?
Well, because so whenever I consider dental monitoring, again, because our practice is already at capacity and busy, and everyone does feel kind of like we're at our limit, kind of a thing. It's been that way for a while. It's like I'm looking into these different ways. I'm thinking, okay, well, if I adopt this, I'm going to have to hire an additional person just to handle all the monitoring.
And then that person, you're so dependent on them.
Are they going to be coming to me? And then all of a sudden, my life just got a lot harder.
They'll definitely be coming to you.
Holy cow. So for me, again, know where you are in your practice and know how to incorporate this stuff, right? Because you have to consider like, if I just go all in, maybe that breaks you.
Yeah, I'm not
before
a big
you
fan
get
of
to the
going
point.
all in until you're like,
but
maybe I'll let you go all in and see how it works.
But what I've found, the interesting thing for me was, you think like, at least I thought like, well, aligners are aligners.
Yeah.
Aligners are aligners. And just going through, these Oliv summits and stuff, the interesting thing for me was I realized that, oh my gosh, there is a paradigm shift. And I was surprised at it. I was actually surprised at it. Like, whoa, hold on, wait, what they're talking about in terms of engaging the undercuts and the type of plastic that's used and the way the plastic's cut and the way that the teeth are staged and how there's data behind the movements. Like we have what are called guardrails that Clark was big in, we all participated in that, but we established what are called these guardrails. Like, okay, what's realistic with moving a tooth here? Actually realistic. What does the data show? How much can a tooth move? And with aligners even. What's realistic? Okay, well, let's set guardrails. We're not going to be doing stuff that is this movement on a computer screen that you're thinking.
A tooth moving through a tooth is my favorite.
Yeah, or where it's. I remember Clark saying at the beginning, you sometimes get back a digital treatment setup that defies the laws of physics.
Yeah.
That defies the laws of physics. Like this isn't just a computer, this isn't just like a video game. Basically, this isn't just a video game. We're moving teeth here and there are certain ways that teeth can move. Okay, so let's identify those. Okay, what are for different teeth, let's try and find data there. And then, okay, let's set guardrails for tooth movements that are actually predictable so that your aligners will perform better. And the way that we cut, the way that we engage, the way this, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh. And then I've been using it for the last couple of years and I'm noticing like, okay, of course, it's important to not have rose-colored glasses and to always try and be aware of our biases and maybe blind spots even. But to me, I'm thinking, okay, like this is a pretty complex case and they have 36 aligners in this first batch. I'm seeing them, at aligner 24 right now. Things are tracking well. And this looks way better than I would be used to seeing this 25 weeks in. Way better. Like it's like way closer to being done than I'm used to seeing. And we do a lot of aligners. So I've got quite a bit of experience using aligners. And my wife, Diana, is doing Oliv right now. And she wanted to level some curve of speed. She'd had some limited treatment before, but not like comprehensive. And, aligner 12, aligner 13 in, like I'm looking at her and looking at the original scan, like it's leveling with like two attachments. It's leveling. I'm like, okay, I'm noticing significant leveling. So my point is, of course, we always have biases. And of course, like we're gonna, as human beings, want to tend to see the things that we've been involved in or whatever as being better. And,
our kid's always the best one in the choir.
Yeah, right. So, but you have to be aware of that. And I think that's part of the integrity of Oliv is it feels to me like we're trying to do this in a way that's like, well, honest about it.
Bettering the profession by being more predictable.
Yeah, I was talking to my barber actually this weekend. I got, all cut up for the podcast. Yeah, he does the lines.
I thought you nicked yourself or something. So that was intentional?
It's still intentional.
Okay, they missed the back.
I'm still doing it. You know what? We'll be rocking it for a while. Who knows? Who knows when we'll give it up? But one day it'll have to be given up. I understand. Yeah. All things must pass. But anyway, I was talking to my barber over the weekend, and he asked what was going on. I was talking to you, Esther, last night about this, and I'm trying to describe to him what this is. I'm like, well, it's like a launch. It's like a product launch. He's like, well, it's this aligner system, and it's like we've been working on it for the last little bit. And he's like, well, why'd you get involved? And I said, well, when I get involved with something like this, I always assume, like if there's any stock option financial, I always assume that's going to be nothing. You have to assume it's going to be nothing. Why? Because to me, at this stage of my life, my investment in time is so important. And the chemistry, like I love doing this podcast with you guys because I love the chemistry we have. Yeah. I love the conversations that we get to have. I always feel like at the end, I feel like that was fun. And now I get, I know somebody better. I learned some great things. But chemistry, so I think there's great chemistry in the team, right? There's a great sense of chemistry.
It's a great team. I mean, I enjoyed partying with you guys last night. Yeah, so, not you were in bed.
I was in bed. But the point is, I think what I've found is I think that the system actually seems to work really well. and I like the people that are involved.
Right, Esther. Well, a big part of our podcast is quick, actionable pearls that people can put into their practice on Monday. A lot of us have looked into aligner alternatives. We're all familiar with certain brands, and we've looked at getting away and working with companies that more resonate with us. I think some big ones in there like Angel Aligner and now Oliv and Spark. There's all kinds. But really, amongst those systems, there's some similar biomechanics that do transcend systems, right? So I'd love to know just some quick aligner pearls that you found in your practice over many years of working with aligners that you could share with our listeners today.
For sure. So I think number one is don't always trust what you see on the screen. That's not reality. And like we were referencing earlier,
Facebook or
there are
All of the
guardrails.
above.
All of the
If
above.
you
All
see
of
a
the above.
tooth
Screen is lying,
distalizing 6 millimeters, we know that's not reality. It looks really great and looks really cool. So I think it's always important to say, like, there's a human being attached to this mouth that AI is, deciding based on averages that this is how the teeth are going to move. So to take that with a grain of salt and use your expertise to not trust everything that you're seeing. Sure. A huge pearl I learned from one of the Oliv team members, Blake Davis, was about keeping space at the end of refinements. So don't try to close space before you move into a refinement. If you're working on rotations, keep that space. You want your plastic to cover as much as possible to get more predictable movements. I want happy patients. I'm aiming for 1 refinement max. And my patients are very particular, as am I. And again, using a system that has been predictable time and time again, that has better realistic results on the screen as well, has been great for me. So I love Oliv, not only because I'm a part of it, but because I've seen what it can do.
That's awesome. Now, how about in your practice? I know you've run a very efficient practice, especially working less but being more efficient. What are some things in terms of systems in your practice? What pearls can you share with our audience?
So number one, not to be redundant, is leaning into the digital stuff. So I am primarily aligners and light force. So I'm using systems that, again, feel more predictable to me, that allow me to go longer intervals for my patients, which it serves me and serves them. Yes, it is more expensive, but I feel like that pays off in the long run, and you should reflect that in your fees. You have to value what you do. I'm also a believer in not being pressured into things. So LA to me is like the wild, wild west of dentistry and orthodontics. I see a lot of weird things walk through the door, appliances I've never heard of, pediatric dentists calling me saying, do this to a 4-year-old, every mom coming in freaked out that their kid needs a frenectomy because that's what's being, blasted to them. So again, coming back to integrity, I love my practice. I love going in there, even when I have to tell someone that what they believe is not true, because I stick to my guns and I believe in what I know, going back to evidence-based. I'm not gonna let someone pressure me to do something to their patient if I don't think it's in their best interest. So that is, to me, the most important thing, because it's allowed me to live my truth and really grow into my practice. And my practice is growing, and it's grown every year. But just January and February, not to gloat, but I think I'm up like 30% in 2026.
That's incredible.
Which is crazy, and I'm still working the same amount.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a testament to leaning into technology, empowering my staff, keeping everybody happy, keeping the systems running, a well-oiled machine. My office is my little engine that could, and I'm just watching it chug and chug and chug. So I really believe that if you do things the right way and not get yourself into trouble, and I'm all for testing things out when they make sense, but I think people get really hung up on things because they're trendy or they hear someone speak about it, and you got to have a critical mind. I think it really comes back to having a critical mind.
Yeah, I love that you said going back to evidence-based research. We see that too, where there's all these new, ideas and products, or expanding everyone. And I'm like you, if it's not in the literature, I don't do it. It's got to make sense to me. And I feel that builds trust long-term.
Oh, it for sure does. And my favorite line is when someone comes in and says, I was told that, Billy needs an Alpha appliance. And I say, well, I don't experiment on children. So, because that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I'm not a case study person. Right? I'm a randomized control trial person. My mom's an epidemiologist, right? I believe in double-blinded. I believe in real research.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really important, because that defines who we are as experts.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like testing out an aligner system is one thing, but doing something that doesn't make sense, you have to go back to basics sometimes.
Did someone really come into your office asking for an Alf appliance?
Oh, more than once.
Still around? I
It is
thought
still
that has been
around.
completely debunked at this point. Didn't like the LVI Institute, isn't that the appliance they got in trouble for?
I think
No,
so.
that's a
No, that was
DNA
the
appliance.
DNA appliance, that's what I'm
No,
thinking
the
of. But it's
Alf is
basically
the
same thing,
night
right?
high
It's
spring.
a wire thing.
It's a
like
wire
all
thing.
this,
Uh-huh.
It's like a removable
Yep.
appliance that can be expanded, and it's,
They do them on the top, on the bottom, in your nose. They could do it everywhere.
Is
That's done by
It works
orthotropists.
just as well.
It's
whenever you put it.
orthotropic. Yep.
So that's wild stuff. But no, I'm with you there. I think, as I've gotten older, more experienced, I used to be the one to jump into like all this new technology. I remember I was at the AAO one time and one of my former mentors was there. And, we were in, I'm not going to talk about the specific technology. It doesn't really exist anymore, but I was really into it at the time, and I said, hey, have you tried this thing out? Like we should, and he's like, that's for young guys now. I don't really mess with that stuff. And I'm here in my head thinking like, I'm going to eat this guy's lunch, And then a few years later, it's like, well, that was a waste of time and money. So it just that we're talking so much about efficiency. Sometimes when you adopt the wrong technology, it has a counterproductive effect on your office.
Agreed.
It's very easy to promise efficiency, to come out with these ideas that sound like they make sense, but then for them to actually work is an entirely different situation. So I commend you guys for taking the time to really delve into it and look at the evidence and figure out, is this something that is living up to the hype before you just jump out and
it's been like a slow release, which I think is good because then there's no like desperation.
Yeah.
Right. It's like it'll find its niche. Why? Because it knows what it is.
And there's
no
just
pressure. Just like
there's
you know who you are, right? You know who you are, and you know what you want to be, and so you've carved out this niche. I think Oliv is similar, which is I think they're doing really well. Is they know who they are and they know what what they're doing, and I think it's going to just find the people that it finds, and I've been really happy with it in that sense. But Esther.
Yes.
So you've gotten to know yourself really well. Of course, I've mentioned that several times, which I think is wonderful. What life pearls do you have for our listeners? How can they develop the trust and confidence in themselves that you have in yourself? What are some practices that you did, or is there anything that comes to mind that wasn't just because you had good parents? Are there any practices, right? Or because you had the life you had, right? But are there things that you can recommend?
I think sometimes, not to be too general, but it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Because uncomfortable things are going to happen.
But how do you do that? Breathe? Do you just breathe? Just face it and say, hey, have a
but
faith
it's
that
also
it's
learning
okay.
not to get defensive, learning not to be too reactive. So actually taking a moment to pause.
Yeah.
Sometimes a patient will ask me something and I don't know the answer right away, and I say, what, that's a really good question. Let me take a second.
Yeah.
And I think knowing yourself well enough to not just spew out the first thing that comes to mind is important.
Act intentionally.
Yes.
Right.
And then I think for sure having boundaries in life,
but
also having like the flexibility of your mind to be able to adapt to certain things, which goes along with the uncomfortable, and prioritizing. So again, for me, like those glass balls, being a mom is my number one. That is what fills me the most. That's what gives me the most joy, being with my husband, being with my children. So that's priority number one. When people say, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a mom and my hobby is an orthodontist, because that's truly how I feel. I love going to work. I love my schedule. I'm lucky that, I have a partner who also earns, so it's not all on me.
Sure. Yeah.
But I really feel like I know how to prioritize what matters most. And going back to self-care and fitness and well-being, if my body is not good, well, then nothing else is going to be good. So, if I finish at 12, I have a 12:15 Pilates class, which again, marketing, I'm meeting other moms. I get patients from there all the time, or it's, stretching and taking care of myself, going for a massage, things that are important so I can shut off my brain also. Because all of us, our gears are constantly turning, right? These critical minds. So I think those are important important practices. And I think it's
slow down.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, like, you know what, I just need to close the door to my bedroom right now and sit down and like just kind of take a minute and speak to your partner about that so they could support you during those times, right? Because sometimes I get home and it was just also like I engaged with X amount of people in 4 hours and I'm like, oh my God, I'm spinning, I'm spent, you know? And I'm like, okay, before I go see the kids, like I just want a minute to like collect myself so that like I don't want to have a short fuse around them. Right? So I think those are important things because they learn from you, right? Yes. We're modeling for them all the time. And I want to be the best mom I can be. So in order to be that, I have to know myself well enough.
Accept your humanity, right? You accept your humanity. Like, I can't just be a machine. I can't just always have it on.
Yeah, we're not robots.
Sometimes I actually am off. I have to acknowledge, I'm just off right now. What do I need? I need to step back for a second. I need to just take a breather. I need to, but ultimately I think, you know, I always try to boil things down to like the ultimate thing. I think ultimately it sounds to me like you have a faith. Why? Because you can pause. Why? Because you have faith that
things will work out.
Yes, you'll know what to say, even if you don't know what to say. Like I'll know that I'll find the right answer or it will work. Yeah, just this faith that like we don't have to react. Yeah. We can act intentionally. And of course, I can see in my life how often in the past, and I'm more aware of it now, but I would be more reactive. Why? Because probably more fear-based. Yeah. And I think at this point in our lives, we can say, hey, well, we don't have to be so fear-based, even though we've experienced so much more and we have every reason to be on the one hand. On the other hand, you know, but things are going to be okay. Because things bounce back.
This is tough, I think, for a lot of us. I know for me personally, you know, because we all know Grant Collins. I was talking with him earlier today, and I think he mentioned maybe to all of us a little while ago that one of his favorite sayings now when his employees come to him with a question he can't answer right away is, well, we'll figure it out. You know, so I don't know the solution now, but I have confidence I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's a really great way of going about it. But I'll admit, you know, there's a lot of pressure, you know, that comes from our positions. We talk about how you mentioned you have to sit in your car sometimes and just decompress and just, you know, so you're not in that, like for me, I call it boss mode. You know, I don't want to be in boss mode with my kids, you know, probably shouldn't be in boss mode with my employees either. But, you know, it's just like you come home and you got such decision fatigue and you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You read these stories about other orthodontists who they lost their biggest referral source because they brought in orthodontics or they started using this Alpha appliance or whatever it is, you know. And it's hard not to sometimes succumb to that anxiety that, you know, what if this world that I'm holding up for everyone else, what if I stumble and what if it crashes?
Glass balls.
And then, exactly. Yeah.
But I wanna say one thing, because I don't know if anyone listening or if you guys heard Eileen Gu after the Olympics. She was interviewed. Okay, so she won the gold medal. She was competing for China and was getting a lot of flack for being a U.S. citizen.
She was a U.S. one, yeah.
But she is so well-spoken and so intelligent. And, you know, a reporter asked her a question and she basically said, she reflected on 8-year-old her, looking at her at this point in life and how 8-year-old her would view where she is. And she called it the ultimate flex. Yes. And I sat there for a second. My husband showed it to me. He's like, you gotta see this. And I, like, when something resonates so deeply, and I was like, I wonder what 8-year-old me, little Esther Feldman in Montreal in my little Jewish community, you know, what I would think of where I've gotten. If I connect the dots of my life, of how I got from there to here, I could have never imagined it.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to remember where we come from and all the discomfort we experienced along the way to get to where we are, and to own that. And to think like, I've accomplished all of this. 8-year-old me would be like, holy moly, you did it, you made it. Yeah. And I think like, it's so, like, we shouldn't always think about the negative. We have to think about, think about like, look, like, you know, I did all these exams and interviews and jobs and, you know, scrapped everything all together by the bootstraps.
I mean, you got into dental school, residency.
And found a partner and got married and had children and worked all the time and did this and did that. And it's like, I did that. And
You're
I
living
think
your life in the gain. There's this great book, The Gap in the Gain, if you've read that, but it talks about how we're always we tend to look at the gap, like what's missing in our life. But if you look at the gain, like where you are, you can be happy in this moment. There's always going to be another fish, something to accomplish. There's always going to be challenges and setbacks. But if you live in the gain and realizing, like you said, 8-year-old looking at you now and all of that, there's so much just joy in that.
We've achieved amazing things in our lives. And I think we should feel that.
More of a celebratory type of living.
Yeah, and model that for our children and our patients,
scarcity,
right?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm not gonna lie.
We all have days.
Yeah, but I think that's the beautiful
it's
thing.
not all
though.
rainbows and
but
unicorns.
I think that's the beautiful thing is the tension. I was having a conversation last night with Jeff Suited actually and Glenn Krieger, and we were just talking about that. The tension is the place to be.
Yeah.
Like we always want absolution. Like, well, we always want one day I just want freedom, but just bliss.
Yeah.
It's like, but then you're dead.
When does that come?
That's when you're dead.
That's right.
Okay, so living in the tension's good. Like it's not that there aren't problems. There are problems, and there are problems that have to be faced, and they have to be dealt with.
And mistakes that will be
and
made.
And even mistakes we have made or will make that we have to just own up to and integrate. And like your relationship didn't work out, but you landed in LA.
Yes.
And that's part of your story. Even failed relationships, quote unquote failed, I don't view them as a failure if I feel like, you know what, I can still honor that person in my heart. I can still actually love that person for who they are, and I can wish them well. I can be grateful for the good, because they do have good, they all have good, and the things that were challenging.
And that you learned from you won't.
There was no way I could have learned those things without being legitimately challenged to point out my deficiencies. So,
yes.
Yeah. I'm happy to point out your deficiencies.
I know, and I love you because of it. Absolutely. Don't think I don't appreciate it, because I actually do.
Yeah. Well, guys, I really appreciate the conversation. I think this has been awesome. Esther, it's been great hearing your story.
Thank you.
Very fascinating one. And of course, we do have a cocktail hour to get to. And Chris has probably got to work out for the 3rd time today. I'll probably join you in there. But I just wanted to thank you for being with us today, Esther.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You know, if anyone wants to get in touch with you for any follow-up questions, or maybe they want to get involved with Oliv, you know, how do they get that process started?
So I'm going to give you my email. It's Esther, ESTHER, at drfeldmanortho.com, Dr. Feldman, Feldman, ortho.com. And then in terms of Oliv, I would say reach out to our VP, Kate, and she could get you on that wait list.
All right, well, thank you all for tuning in today. We really do appreciate it. We would love if you could follow our show, give us a like, give us a 5-star review. Please don't leave any other bad kind of reviews. Just keep that to yourself. But if you are a vendor who's interested in sponsoring either the show, the podcast, meeting, or the Facebook group, please reach out to us at orthodonticpearls@gmail.com. And we have sponsorship opportunities as low as $100, so you can't really lose with that. Thanks again, guys, for being with us today. Let's go hit that rooftop bar.